What are the downsides of weed that people don't talk about? As a pretty consistent weed smoker, I don't like when people say that weed isn't addicting. They're right in saying that it's not addictive chemically like nicotine or something. You can still get addicted to not being sober. I've noticed after the initial uptick in chatter, people tend to get really quiet and zoned out in their own thoughts. When I used to smoke it, I found it had a dulling effect on my personality and conversational skills after the fact. 2. It can become your only personality trait. Demotivation in heavy consumers. It is fine in moderation, but multiple times per day seems to suck the ambition from most people I've seen, including myself long ago. Inhaling any type of smoke at all isn't good for your lungs. And that shit's expensive. It makes you okay with being just okay. One thing that I never see brought up is the effect of marijuana on dreaming. Marijuana use can prevent the user from dreaming during regular sleep. When the user stops using marijuana for a while, they can experience night after night of extremely vivid dreams. I can only speak for my own experience, but I have heard this echoed by a coworker's dad who started smoking again because he couldn't handle having acid trip dreams every night. I suspect that marijuana has some potent effect on REM sleep that will remain underdocumented until it is descheduled and more thorough research can be done. Edit. Wow, I was not expecting this to get such a reaction. Thanks for the silver, elves. I smoked every day for about 10 years. Minus about 6 months in all, that is, I needed to be clean for a drug test for a job. Emo weed starts off amazing and fun, but after becoming a habitual smoker it turns into a crux that's hard to shake. It's not that it's super addicting, it's just nothing is as fun as being high, so you want to be high all the time. It dulls feelings but highlights feelings of existentialism which can sometimes be overbearing. I would also feel stuck in my life a lot. Like it would be hard to make changes, but I would want better things for myself, but it always seemed impossible to achieve. I did have problems with breathing, but I have a history of asthma and took up Tai Chi to compensate, which I found really enjoyable, and it helped me to slow down greatly on smoking. The one most annoying thing with being a smoker is your tolerance level goes way up, so even though you're smoking you aren't getting that high you used to get. Just a mind-numbing insomnia almost. I also had a loss of appetite over time and ate less. It also made me feel comfortable with where I was in life, and I had a lack of motivation. Though some days, like once a month or two, it could really motivate you to do something, but that would wither away quickly. Overall, I would recommend it only at parties or every once in a while, but I have quit a while ago and never want to go back to being a daily smoker. Also, me being an expectant mother now has changed my feelings towards it. I don't want my kids growing up around it or around me being high. I feel they should find that on their own if they want, and I shouldn't influence them to think it's okay. Edit. Wow, a lot of comments on this, which is surprising for me. I will try to answer you all over time. Thank you everyone for the gold and silver and such. I just want to say I did mean crux instead of crutch. Like I said, weed highlighted thoughts and feelings of existentialism in my life. So I felt like a martyr, almost on my quest to find answers to these questions of mine. I felt like I was crucifying myself for a righteous cause to know what I wanted to know. Also, a lot of people saying I described addiction when I stated weed wasn't addicting. I always thought if something was addicting you couldn't quit cold turkey due to your body going into shock or death. Or that you couldn't quit without help like methadone for heroin addicts or something. Since I quit weed cold turkey and when I wanted to, I didn't think it was addicting. Like I choose to eat eggs every day for breakfast. It's not addicting, but I like it and choose it. But maybe I am addicted. Lol, just stating. Also, I did psychedelics for a period of time throughout all this. So maybe this changed how weed affected me over time. I had a lot of bad trips and can't even think about tripping again. God bless all of you guys though. I know weed affects people differently, I just wanted to share how it affected me over time. I don't think it should be illegal though, and I think people should be free to use it as they see fit. I believe everyone has the personal liberty to choose their own path. Edit 2. Anyone looking for advice on how to stop? I recommend changing your routine. My husband and I took up different activities like taking the dogs to the dog park, going to hockey games, spending more time with family, going to the beach, Tai Chi, etc. We are both homebodies, but we decided to go out and be more active, and it helped to break the routine of sitting at home smoking. Find new stuff to do instead. Weed is for people that have found their way in life. It's not for people who are looking for the way. My uncle. In other words, as fun as it may seem when you're young. Get your shit together first: education, family, career, etc. Edit. Thanks for the gilding, kind strangers. And for those of you who have taken offense, relax. I'm glad it all worked out for you, or my sympathies if it didn't. Regardless, weed can for most people take your motivation and drive away if it's taken up and consumed in high volumes at an early age. It's just think it isn't a good idea, I think, if you're ripping bongs every day from 16 up through high school. I would say that as a long-term smoker that wants out, it has made me incredibly boring. If I have evening plans on the weekend but smoke anything in the day, then I'm far more prone to canceling those nighttime plans. If I do attend those plans after smoking in the day, then I feel I'm not entirely there. Awkward silences. Jokes don't land. Keeping a conversation going becomes 10x harder, and I'm inevitably just waiting for an appropriate time to leave. Overall, it just kinda makes you socially awkward and super boring to be around in a social setting. Just from my experience. It seems like most of my response has already been said. But I want to reiterate 3 major observations what I've noticed from my own semi-frequently weed consumption. Demotivation. The impact from weed on motivation levels I find is in 2 parts. The first part is when you initially consume the weed. Most people fall into a habit of eating food and watching something on TV. The second part one found is the next morning. I experience a type of weed hangover the following morning. I feel more groggy and more susceptible to just loading around the following day. Anxiety. Things that aren't currently stressing you out may start to induce anxiety in you. While this isn't always the case, weed has the potential to worsen your mental state if you aren't careful. This impact became more pronounced when I smoked weed solo. Having other people around allowed me to be more present in the moment. Whereas I was in my head when I was alone. Food consumption. I found for me that continued weed use led to some unhealthy eating habits. The munchies are real, and for often that not you are craving food that is not considered healthy. If this becomes a more common occurrence, then your overall diet can go south quickly. It can trigger psychosis if you're susceptible to it already. Like anything else in the world, it can be addictive. Putting anything that's not air in your lungs is bad for you. It's really bad for developing brains. i.e., anyone under 25. Not having an appetite if you're not high. You have to smoke heavily though to get to that point. I can't imagine this will get seen now. However, I'm going to comment because I rarely ever do. I am in my mid-20s studying to be a professional pilot. And have smoked habitually several times a day for the last several years. While I am still a large advocate for marijuana, I stopped smoking entirely about a month ago because I realized a few things. 1. I became complacent with my life and my surroundings. Rarely wanting to make a change in my routine because I knew when I able to spark up. 2. I would spend extra cash on edibles, concentrates, weed, etc. Essentially having extra spending money meant it was going to get me high. 3. I felt as if I would make excuses to not see friends and family. So that I would ensure that I would be comfortable and at home with my shit in hand. 4. It becomes a nightly ritual. To the point where going to sleep without it sounded impossible. 5. Following number 4. You stop dreaming. Due to the fact that THC hinders REM sleep. I never really understood this until I quit and started having incredibly memorable and vivid dreams. With all that said, I still believe it's a beautiful plant that has wonderful benefits. But, if you're at the point where you think that you can't live without it, I need you to know that nothing is healthy in excessive amounts. Edit. If anybody needs help or advice on how to help stop smoking, please feel free to message me. I'm more than happy to help brothers and sisters. Brain structure and function. A systematic review of 56 published neuroimaging studies of brain structure and function in adult cannabis users found consistent evidence of reduced hippocampal volume and lower hippocampal gray matter density in cannabis users relative to controls, and no evidence for changes in whole brain volume. Evidence for changes in other brain regions was inconsistent or inconclusive. 1. Findings for other brain regions were inconsistent or inconclusive. Abnormalities of neuronal activity were observed even when cognitive task performance was normal. suggesting that cannabis users may need to engage different levels of neuronal activation to achieve normal performance. The hippocampus, among other things, is primarily responsible for memory. Habitual marijuana use changes neuron activity, requiring the brain to adapt to perform normal tasks. It's unclear if these adaptations come at a cost. But it's worth noting that brain function changes greater than cannabis-induced psychosis. A national registry study that identified 1,492 patients who received a diagnosis of cannabis-induced psychosis in the Danish Psychiatric Central Research Register between 1994 and 2014 and followed them through August 2014 found a 41.2%, 95% C36. 6 to 46. 2. Conversion rate to schizophrenia. With 50% of men converting within 2.0 years and 50% of women within 4 years. 2. There is a significant hazard of developing schizophrenia for those with underlying family history of the disease, especially during adolescence. Greater than mood disorders. Greater than depression. A 2014 meta-analysis of 14 prospective longitudinal studies that controlled for depression at baseline found that heavy cannabis users had a 1.62 odds ratio, 95% C1. 21 to 2.16, for developing clinically diagnosed major depression or depressive symptoms, compared with light or non-users. 3. Greater than bipolar disorder. A meta-analysis of 2 studies of individuals with bipolar disorder found cannabis use associated with a 3-fold increased risk, odds ratio equals 2.97, 95% C1. 80 to 4.90, for new onset of manic symptoms. 4. Heavy marijuana use is associated with an increased risk of developing major depressive disorder, struck rather than removed for transparency. I misinterpreted the study. Odds ratio does not imply that heavy marijuana use increases risk of depression. And marijuana is associated with those with bipolar disorder being several times more likely to develop mania. The list goes on to include anxiety disorders, lung problems, which should make sense when thinking of inhaling any kind of smoke or vaping fluid, cancer risks, cyclic vomiting syndrome, decreased male fertility, increased risk of tooth, gum disease. Marijuana won't kill you as fast as some other drugs, alcohol, other vices. But that's a far cry from calling it safe. There are likely ways to mitigate some of these risks, like reducing lung problems through use of edibles. But many of these complications from marijuana use stem from the cannabinoids in the system rather than the route of use. This also doesn't touch on the potential benefits of CBD, THC, etc. It's important to remember that when talking about any medicine that there are risks and benefits associated. E.g., aspirin can save your life in a heart attack but can cause stomach bleeding. So we give aspirin shortly after heart attack symptoms start, but we don't recommend taking aspirin daily. Unless we do. Because other factors complicate the picture. Medicine is complicated that way. Parts of marijuana may make for good medicine once it's further studied and the good things isolated. But it's extremely important to remember that being medicinal absolutely does not make it harmless in any way, shape or form. Edit. References appear blocked to some. Here are citations. 1. Nader. D. A. and Sanchez. Z. M. Effects of regular cannabis use on neurocognition, brain structure, and function. A systematic review of findings in adults. The American Journal of Drug and Alcohol Abuse 44. 4–18, 2017. 2. Starzer. M. S. K. Nordentoft. M. and Jorthoj. C. Rates and predictors of conversion to schizophrenia or bipolar disorder following substance-induced psychosis. American Journal of Psychiatry 175. 343–350, 2018. 3. Lev Ran. S. et al. The Association Between Cannabis Use and Depression, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis of Longitudinal Studies. Psychological Medicine 44. 797–810, 2013. 4. Gibbs. M. et al. Cannabis Use and Mania Symptoms, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. European Psychiatry 30. 1128, 2015. Cannabinoid hyperemesis and cyclic vomiting syndrome. Mind-blowing anxiety and paranoia. Every time. Not for me, thanks. Just to clarify my position. I fully uphold anyone's right to do what they feel helps with their own body and am not against weed. If it helps you, I am happy for you. Wish it was the same for me. Happy New Year. After about 10 years of use, my body has developed an allergy that I have never heard anyone else get. When I use THC, my sinus gets inflamed, nearly blocking the airway, forcing me to breathe through my mouth, making falling asleep very difficult. Also, the next morning the boogers I get are relentless. It is like all the stuff is coming back out my sinus. This almost always ends up with minor bleeding nose. Edit. I vape 95% of the time. I cut down to once a week or less. I have no other allergies. I drink more than 3 liters of water in a day if I use THC. I have noticed a pattern with some replies. Possibly something to do with the lymphatic system. Maybe after many years it gets clogged with terpenes or something? Edit 2. I have heard from about 8 or so people that they are getting similar symptoms. I am following up with more questions to see if we can pinpoint anything. Most of us have been using long-term, 5 years or so. Vaping. And smoking. A few people have mentioned their lymph nodes get inflamed, my nodes do not. But the lymph system still feels inflamed. Frequent heavy use can affect your motivation and mood. Even during periods of not being high. It is habit-forming. Not technically addictive. But for some it can be habit-forming in maladaptive ways. Bad for your lungs if you inhale combusted flour. There's this idea that exists that driving while high on weed is somehow safe. It really isn't. It makes you drowsy. Fucks with your reactions time. Makes you spacey. AKA. A bunch of stuff that will make you crash your car and kill someone. This idea among people of like, nah, I'm cool to drive high, is just as dangerous and irresponsible as the people that say I drive better drunk. Both my roommates are heavy smokers. And they just think so slowly. It takes them forever to understand anything. They also forget a lot of stuff. Like they'll step away from the dishes for a moment and then never finish them without prompting. The house smells like a coffin. I eat the occasional edible. But seeing how lethargic they are has convinced me to quit smoking pot entirely. Many people just smoke instead of dealing with their problems. On art trees I'll see people post "GF just broke up with me." Getting high AF. I treat it like I would alcohol only on the weekends and occasionally during the weekdays. And just to have fun and not escape my current life situation. Marijuana definitely needs to be studied more. Up until recently, there haven't been very many scientific studies on the effects of marijuana due to legal issues in the US. That said, there is moderate evidence that acute marijuana use can impair learning, memory, and attention, leading to a reasonable argument that it shouldn't be consumed by those under about 25 since the brain is still developing during that time. One of the biggest downsides of seen as someone that doesn't smoke but who had many friends that do, is it becomes an obsession or crutch. What I mean by this, most of my friends can't get through the day without smoking pot. They constantly need it for stress or irritation. And by doing this it becomes an obsession. For many, including people I've dated, is all they care about doing. Going to their bestie's house and smoking pot. That's literally it. I'm not saying this end up being everyone. But it is many. I hesitate to send you over to our leaves, but it was a really important subreddit for me to learn from. Be kind to the folks over there. It can overcorrect for anxiety and cause more anxiety. It can dull emotions in general. This can be good or bad. When you need to be empathetic or aware, you are less likely to be. It dulls focus. You can power through it and make that focus reappear if needed. But it's an uphill battle to get to that point. And if you lose focus again, you gotta rebuild it. Lowers short-term memory, which leads to less long-term memories, especially of details. It can interfere with sex drive in men. This has been studied and known. Not all men, but some. It can cause stomach pain in some people. It is mentally addictive, and hijacks the dopamine system. This can be reversed by not smoking. But it can make pleasures less pleasurable if you smoke heavily for a long term. This thread is giving me more and more motivation to quit in the new year. What I've noticed about excessive use and what's frequently touched upon here is the demotivation. I become a slobbish baked potato for the most part. I let everything go until it's anxiety-inducing and causes a breakdown. And quitting cold turkey, at least in my experience, can cause sleep paralysis, which is terrifying to say the least. I'm an alcoholic, so I'm definitely not shitting on people who smoke too much. But the hardcore potheads are the most annoying people there are. Like the people who only talk about weed. And all they do is smoke all day every day. And think weed cures everything. Alcohol is definitely worse. But you'll never meet a booze bag who thinks you can cure the flu with a shot of whiskey. Other than annoying me, I'd say burning anything and inhaling the smoke sure as shit won't be good for your lungs. Also, kids smoke it way too much. I did too. But any drugs are gonna be bad for developing minds. If you're an adult and don't become annoyingly obsessed with it, then smoke it to your heart's content. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.